All right. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, I see you. There you are. All right. All right. Let me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Am I loud or terrible, or is everything good?
Sounds good on my end.
Okay, good.
Oh, wow.
There's a way to make this full screen. Is it here? No. This is what I hate about freaking enter full screen. There we go. That's what I needed. And then I'm a professional. Don't worry. We're gonna. And then this, and then this will be you, and then. Bloop.
Hey, there I am.
We've done it.
Perfect.
Good enough. Good enough. Also, Cinder, thank you so much for the resub. 29 freaking months. That's ridiculous. Hello, Alex. How are you been? How is everything?
You know, getting through it. Doing okay, I guess.
Yeah?
This is I've been working from home for 4 years now. So when all this started, I was sort of this is sort of the next day for me. So
Right.
yeah, hanging in there. How
Cool.
about yourself? It's been a while. I can't remember the last time we saw each other. I
I
was
was,
thinking maybe it
yeah.
was Oklahoma.
I was thinking about that. Like, because I know we hung out in, was it the last Vape Bash in Chicago? Because that would have been like 2014 or 15, 16. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Man, yeah, and with all the shows kind of going away, I sort of lost that rhythm.
Right.
So it could have been 2016, could have been longer.
That's the part, yeah. Like that, and that's, and we can talk about that, but like that's a big thing for me is that it doesn't monetarily and financially, none of it affected me, but the social part of it definitely affected me because I don't see anybody anymore. I mean, I got to hang out with Grim, and if you remember Adam from Nickwood, we all went to Amsterdam, and like earlier in the year, which seems like an eternity. Just saying that it was February, but so I've seen them, but yeah, otherwise I don't see anybody. So that's pretty crazy. But do you want to give an introduction, like what you do and what you're all about? We'll get
Sure.
the business part out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, what your subscribers are used to in terms of the vaping people, but I am the CEO of CASAA, the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association. This is officially my Twitch debut.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah,
Take that, world.
exactly. Um, and yeah, we are all about tobacco harm reduction, protecting people's access to low risk alternatives to smoking, which includes vaping. There are smokeless tobacco products out there. There's the new nicotine pouches, heat not burn, you name it. I mean, anybody can probably look around their house and find something that's way safer than a cigarette. But the good and useful products also deliver nicotine. So,
Right.
we're all about meeting people where they're at instead of pushing people and trying to force people into quit smoking. We want to make sure that we all have good alternatives that we actually want to use. I quit smoking by switching to vaping, and that was in 2013.
Right.
And just haven't looked back since.
Yeah, and so like you said, that does mean because I think sometimes people take it as vapors are like just anti-smoking, which we're really not. Like we're more, like there are different things you can do. Like if you want to smoke, then fine. I'm not going to antagonize you, but like there are alternatives, and there are things aside from vaping, like you mentioned, the heat not burn. There's smokeless tobacco, things like snus, which I think you're kind of a fan of snus.
Yeah, I have pretty much stopped vaping, and that was back in, I think, March. Not in response to coronavirus or
Right.
anything. It was just, this was sort of a long time coming. I've been gravitating more and more towards snus. It's hands-free, which is, great on the controller, and I don't have to do this in front of my screen while I'm writing
Right.
anymore. And yeah, it's a good alternative, and there's a lot of data on it too. And it's one of those things where I really wish it were more popular in the States.
Hmm.
It comes from Sweden. Unfortunately, it's banned in Europe because they're just weird.
Right.
But yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I've used snus before. The first time I went to the UK, I took some on the plane, just in preparation for being on the plane for 8 hours, and it can be quite strong. It's definitely it can hit you very, very quickly. And I had one that it was really good, and I was kind of packing my stuff, and I was kind of like, oh shit, like this is bad. Oh god. But
Do you remember the brand? What was it?
I don't. I think I probably still have it. Like I think I put them in the fridge and left them for 5 years now. But yeah, they were. It was something. I can't remember if I got them here or if somebody sent them to me. But yeah, they were. One of them was. And I don't think they were very strong. Like I don't think they were like top of the line, like top strength or anything. I think it was just they had some that were pretty low, and then they had a couple that were like a medium range or something. And I'm just not used to them. Like I was in the hotel room packing up like the night before, and I couldn't really vape inside of there. So I was like, I'm gonna try one of these because I didn't even use them on the plane, and I popped one in, and I was kind of like, this is cool, and then it just suddenly I'm like, oh god. Like that and that was coming from like I used to vape really high nicotine and really never have that problem, but it's definitely a different feeling. And I guess speaking of, and we'll probably kind of jump around a little bit, but I know on the nicotine part, do you find like for me, when I was traveling, like when I was on the plane, I didn't really have a lot of issues with craving nicotine, and I've found as a vapor for the past 11 years that I really seem to find the nicotine addiction to not be what everybody kind of makes it out to be that is not addicted to it. Do you find that to be kind of the case, anecdotally at least?
From personal experience, I mean and I've shared that point with legislators' staff.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually in a meeting with Matt Cully and Monica from is it Mon Vapes? I forget her screen name, but she's in Colorado and has some businesses out there, and everybody knows Matt Cully. You know Matt
Yes.
Cully, right?
Suck my mod, Matt.
Suck my mod, yeah. And so I kind of crashed one of their meetings with a lawmaker in D.C. and I turned to the staff person and I said, this is one of the places where science should be looking, and people should be doing research on how people's relationship with nicotine changes when they move away from combustion. And my point was, I think it's likely that we'll find that specifically talking about young people who are starting vaping in high school, that they're going to have an easier time getting away from nicotine when they choose to do so, or if they're forced to do so, because it's different. Now, I understand that there's a lot of kids out there that are not experiencing that ease with getting away from nicotine,
right?
And that's that's a very interesting topic that I think a lot of the vaping community is probably a little squeamish about,
right?
But I can't dismiss those experiences, and I don't doubt that they're happening. The kids are going through sort of a severe withdrawal as if, me after smoking for 15 years decided to quit cold turkey.
Right, right.
That is entirely possible that kids are experiencing that. So, but, we, as people who used to smoke, or, somebody more in the closer to 25 years old kind of range, if they were to pick up vaping, I think they would have a much easier time to walk away. And I would say, the fact that I'm able to use snus now, I think is a testament to the fact that my relationship with nicotine completely changed when I switched.
Right.
And I was able to, I went through that period of forgetting to vape.
Right.
Like, I never forgot about a cigarette.
Right.
I mean, I would move mountains to go smoke a cigarette, but now I'm finding myself thinking, oh, it's been an hour and I haven't, hit my mod. This is different.
And I mean, I would think from an anecdotal, we'll make sure that we use the correct phrasings. That
right.
I think anecdotally, that we can also say, I mean, you could have withdrawal, which again, we're not denying that withdrawal will happen, but you could have withdrawal from other addictive chemicals as well. Like people can have caffeine headaches, people can have withdrawal from caffeine, and they, and other substances that we get addicted to as well. But yeah, I'm with you that that is very interesting that you switched entirely from vaping, and that's kind of also indicative of the relationship with tobacco that people assume that we have as a vapor or as a non-smoker, that we don't really have like a predilection for tobacco. It's just for either the nicotine or, for me, like a lot of it is just habitual now, that I just enjoy the act of it. And it is very interesting that there's still, even, because as long as you've been fighting this, that and that we've known each other and all that there still seems to not be a separation from tobacco smoking versus the addiction part of it, that everybody still seems to leave out, people are addicted to 2,000 chemicals, not just nicotine. And is that for the amount of time that you've been working with CASAA, has that always been an issue? Like, has that always been a conjecture with dealing with legislatures and stuff like that? That it's like, well, the nicotine is bad, and you're like, listen, there's plenty of other things in there too. Is that something that they just still do not understand, that they still kind of fight that it's like, well, the nicotine's the addictive part, and you're like, yeah.
That's one of those like super complicated and nuanced talking points to try to get across in a 15-minute meeting with a lawmaker.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't really heard that specific, kind of reference to the other chemicals in cigarettes point come up. Usually they just, compare the number of chemicals to the lack of those chemicals in vaping, and say it's, clearly dangerous, which is another one of those weird like science/logical fallacies.
Right.
It's like a chemophobia kind of talking point. Yeah, and as far as I know that people are talking about MAOIs, and that there are compounds in cigarettes that, when heated, they produce these MAOIs, and that has an effect on maybe enhancing the effect of nicotine. I'm totally bungling this up. I think I have a lot of things that I'm not, and I'm definitely not a scientist. So
right.
This is all stuff. Take these little bits of info if you want, and take it to Wikipedia and learn more.
Right.
But that's the extent of my expertise in this area. But yeah, it is. One of the first things I noticed when I quit smoking was I stopped getting headaches in the afternoon.
Right.
So my Advil consumption went way down. And yeah, it was when I did that switch from smoking to vaping, I thought, oh, well, this is great. I'm sort of, it's almost a one-to-one replacement in terms of nicotine. But in that first 2 weeks, I learned pretty quickly. I was still chewing the 4 milligram nicotine gum, mm-hmm. because the vape that I had wasn't doing it. And so, yeah, there's clearly, I think, just anecdotally, it feels to me like there's some other chemical in cigarettes that I was, that I was dependent upon.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've kind of, I know we just kind of jumped into things. Do you want to describe like your, I don't know about average day, but like your general role in CASAA? We've talked about lawmakers, you've talked about meetings and such. Like, do you want to kind of discuss what it is that CASAA does in a roundabout way, as far as like with the
Yes.
legislation and keeping up with things like that?
So, at the top of our list, at the front of our name is consumers, and so CASAA was organized in 2009. It's still preserved on a thread on ECF, Electronic Cigarette Forum, and it was born out of the community, and it was a bunch of people who were really concerned about the products being taken away by FDA, which was happening in 2009, and realized that the consumer voice was missing from all of this conversation about tobacco products, tobacco control. There's supposed to be a consumer representative on the Tobacco Products Scientific Advisory Committee at FDA, which is TPSAC. But that person is usually they lean more on the tobacco control side. They have some sort of medical background. They're not really speaking for consumers.
Right.
So that was the really necessary part of it, and that's always at the top of our mission. Is we are the organized voice of the consumer, and the main request there is we want access to these products. We don't want to have to jump through a bunch of hoops to quit smoking. It's unbelievable how hard we've had to fight to justify the fact that we've quit, just to say that we've quit smoking.
Yeah.
Retailers cannot tell you the truth about these products, that they work as an alternative. And so, a lot of it is making sure that we're putting, credible, honest, truthful information out there from researchers who are doing the work that can get them, blackballed from their inner circles in academia and science. People like Riccardo Pelosa in Italy. You've got Farsalinos, who did a bunch of studies. I think cardiology is his main focus, and other people who have sort of left the Truth Initiative. They are speaking up now in favor of tobacco harm reduction. And so, really it's about amplifying those voices and getting it in front of consumers in a way that's understandable, providing people with the resources to advocate for themselves, take our materials and learn them and present these talking points to your lawmakers. And that's what we need. We need more people who are directly affected by these policies speaking up on our own behalf.
Yeah.
And, our job here is to activate all of these people who are very passionate about these products and arm them with the information that they need to be persuasive.
And on that, I guess as a disclaimer, I believe you're one of the only few that are actually getting paid for this job. That generally most CASAA is all volunteer, and it's not you guys are not getting rich from this. This is not I don't know how it's termed, if it's a nonprofit or how that works, but you guys are not, generally people are not taking salaries that are working with CASAA.
Yeah, so I started as a volunteer in 2014. I was tapped to join the board of directors, and I immediately filled Greg Conley's place as legislative director. And that's really how I got involved in all of this, was just reading legislation and trying to understand what was going on, and I've just kept doing that. And yeah, that turned into a paid position. CASAA grew in our membership, and we grew in the amount of the quality and the amount of service that we wanted to provide for the community. And the board realized that there needed to be a full-time person doing that. I was working a full-time job when I was volunteering for CASAA. I would work until 5 o'clock, get home between 5:30 and 6, depending on the traffic, and spend the rest of my evening in front of the screen reading bills and just trying to get engaged with all this. And it was my only stipulation to the board was that it had to be a lateral move. I couldn't take a pay cut in order to do it. So I moved from my job slinging rental vans in the swamp in New Jersey to working from home and doing CASAA work for the same pay and no benefits.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Because it's
But I will add to that. I think, when people hear the term nonprofit, for all of the nonprofit organizations that are out there, working for a nonprofit doesn't mean you've taken some vow of poverty. It's usually based, the CEO and upper management people, their salaries are usually based on how much money that nonprofit is bringing in. So, people like Matt Myers are making well over they're making six figures a year, definitely. Truth Initiative, I think she might make $1 million a year. Robin Koval, it's around there. It's up there. So, we don't bring in near that amount of money. So,
right.
yeah, this is I am paid. Kristen Knoll Marsh is a part-time employee. She, all the social media stuff that you see is primarily coming from her, and so we pay her part-time for her efforts. And are very grateful for her work. And then also, the two most active people on our board in terms of CASAA stuff are Julie Wessner and Danielle Jones.
Yeah.
And Danielle has a background in marketing.
She's really good.
So the really nice new website that we have
Right.
is partly due to her talents. We were able to, and her talent, she fundraised for the project and got it funded. And we were able to actually pay to have a professional do our website.
Nice.
So it's prettier and it's way more useful than it used to be. And we have Danielle to thank for that.
Yeah.
And she's a volunteer.
Yeah, she does tremendous work. I mean, she's done some of the I'll post them on my Discord for everybody. But she's done several Truth About Vaping videos talking about the other topics that we might get into, like with the master settlement agreement and where the money from tobacco sales is actually going and why there's such a push for no one, at least I don't see any anti-smoking ads anymore. All I see is anti-vaping ads. Like, it seems that no one gives a shit about smoking, that they just want to say, well, you can't vape anymore. And there's a lot of, I think in the beginning it seemed like this is a lot of conspiracy theory, and then when you dig into it, you're like, this is actually true. Like, there's a lot of money to be lost by the states and the governments if tobacco sales drop. And is that fair to say?
Yeah, I tend to I do my level best to also avoid kind of the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory angles on this. And I think I've sort of reframed it a little bit and as more of a conflict of interest that the state doesn't acknowledge. And so I would prefer, I think if someone can get a rule introduced in state legislatures before the sessions begin, saying that before any tobacco bill is discussed, the leader of the committee or someone on the committee has to read a statement about how much the state takes in tobacco tax revenue. I know that's sort of in people's minds, but it's never clearly stated. And if you're a researcher or if you're presenting at any of these conferences, you have to declare your conflicts of interest. If you want your work published, you have to declare who the funding came from. So yeah. I don't think that the state should be exempt from that kind of rule. And the people in the audience, the people listening at home, they should know how many millions of dollars are on the line if they lose tax, if cigarettes lose market share to vapor products. Yeah.
Do you want to speak on the master settlement agreement to give a brief background on what it is?
So yeah, I mean, I can give you the broad strokes for folks who don't know. I do not count myself as an expert on the MSA, but to be specific, it is the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement, and I am foggy on the dates. I believe it was mid-90s when everything was settled, and basically a few states sued the tobacco companies for all the damages done from smoking, which of course was due to tobacco companies misleading consumers and policymakers and the medical community for so many years. And essentially what happened was all of these states started suing the tobacco companies, and they said, okay, enough. We're going to put this all under one lawsuit. It's the Master Settlement Agreement. And I want to say it's like 200 some odd billion was the final settlement to be paid over, ad infinitum.
Right.
I'm not a Latin professor. So in perpetuity, there we go.
Yeah.
And so, and those payments are based on your company's market share. So there are, I think, sort of the 3 or 4 main companies, Philip Morris, which is now Altria, Reynolds. I don't know if Imperial was in on the suit, and somebody else. And then there were other companies that was, it's weird to me, it gets murky, where they could sort of voluntarily opt in to being
Right.
part of the settlement, and then they have to pay the disbursements, whatever it is. And states get these disbursements based, again, I think, on, the sales of cigarettes in their state. And so places like New York, New Jersey, the more densely populated states, the more populous states, get tons of money. And to put that tinfoil hat back on, you will notice that these are usually the states that are being the most aggressive towards vaping.
Right.
So, New Jersey was the first state to ban vaping indoors, one of the first 3 to ban sales of flavored products. New York, where I am, Massachusetts is just, they have that puritanical history, which some people think is sort of the reason for a lot of the bad policy there. Of course, they legalized recreational marijuana before anyone else in New England, so I don't know.
Yeah.
They're definitely not burning witches anymore.
Right.
Yeah. I know I totally went off on a tangent there, but the Master Settlement Agreement is another one of those financial conflicts that states should be, abundantly open about, and it's just not it's not something that I think your average consumer understands the full ramifications. People think that this master settlement money goes directly to offsetting the cost of all the early death and disease caused by smoking. But just like the taxes that states are collecting, there's nothing telling states where they have to spend this money.
Right.
There are CDC recommendations that they should spend a certain percentage of the MSA money on anti-tobacco campaigns, but I think, like, most states spend less than 20% of MSA money on that. I think New Jersey, I'm pretty sure New Jersey spends $0. And New Jersey is one of the states that they wanted their cash all up front, and they laid it on the stock market. So that's not really the way to talk about it, but they sold bonds, and they're in danger of defaulting on these things. And so it's, again, in New Jersey, multiple layers of conflict there.
Yeah. And that, because that seems to be a thing, because I think California was also one of those that's the part that I'm not a financialologist, and so, like, the way that they bonded the money or whatever it is, and basically got the money in advance, and now they're paying it back. And so when they're yearly or monthly, whatever, however they get paid, like the money coming in from the MSA, they're not making as much as they were expecting. And so now they're getting behind further and further on these payments, which means that they are fighting against vaping because they need people to buy more cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I mean, which is the way, I guess, the partial conspiracy idea is that's what's happening, is that they're in danger of defaulting and need money because they thought they were going to. I'm sure they expected tobacco sales to continue to exponentially go up, as they seem to have done in the past, but there's been a market. I mean, it's dropped. I mean, and it's not like a huge amount, but I mean, it's a noticeable amount from what it should be, which we presume is probably from vaping.
So there's a technical term for what I'm about to describe, and I don't know it, but this is sort of, I think, further to the point that this is not so much of a conspiracy as it is out in the open. It's just not really talked about.
Right.
So part of, getting tobacco companies to agree to all of this stuff, whether it was the Tobacco Control Act or the Master Settlement Agreement, is, I think, there's a couple of acknowledgments here. The first acknowledgement is that if you just wreck the tobacco companies, cigarettes are still going to get made and sold and consumed. There's going to be an underground market. So that's why none of this stuff can actually go for the throat of established tobacco companies. No matter how abhorrent you find smoking, we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
So,
right. It's never going away.
We can either have a relatively clean source of this product, or we can buy it out of the back of a van.
Right.
Which one do you think is going to cause more death and disease? We have data to back up that, that conclusion. So the idea that we, kind of baked into the Master Settlement Agreement is that it would be a gradual decline in cigarettes, so that tobacco companies wouldn't just go out of business on Monday.
Right.
And it's that slow decline that you're talking about. That's what everybody was expecting.
Yeah.
No one expected vapor products to come along and get super popular. And so for the tobacco companies, what's really happened with tobacco companies is they've been forced, because of the way that the market has changed, to adapt their products and try to get in on the vaping stuff. And they'll likely be successful. I've used Views. It's a decent product. It's, they're all better than the crap that they were, putting out at the beginning when they were 5 years late to the party.
Right.
So, they've evolved. They've got the people power. They've got the money. They can make these products, and they can navigate the authorization process. But it's still, everybody is scrambling to get the policies to meet up with the technology, so that they're not left suddenly without a lot of money.
Yeah.
And tobacco companies know this. They budget for, this anticipated decline in sales, and it's just, no one saw this coming, and it caused such a huge decline, a noticeable decline in smoking prevalence, that it's going to be showing up in everybody's budgets.
Yeah. And so so to back up with some of the history behind kind of the legislation where we're at now, was 2009, I think it was, like when it was deemed a lot of stuff was happening with vaping. Products were coming into America from China, and it was causing a big uproar, and there was a large case with the FDA versus Enjoy, and that it was deemed that vaping was going to fall under the Tobacco Control Act. Was that correct?
Close, but to get the words more dialed in, it was yes, it was Enjoy, or it was Sotera and Smoking Everywhere versus FDA. Sotera is Enjoy, and as the legend has it, Enjoy swooped in and actually saved the lawsuit. It's actually remarkable. A lot of people thought for many years that Enjoy was actually owned by an established tobacco company,
right?
But they've always been just a vapor company. They had tobacco people working there, and some of the greatest people on the planet are working for tobacco companies right now. So the lawsuit happened, and the lawsuit was all about how these vapor companies were marketing their products as a smoking cessation product.
Right.
Or otherwise they were making therapeutic claims.
Right.
And in 2009, I believe the lawsuit began before the Tobacco Control Act passed, but as the lawsuit went on, the Tobacco Control Act passed, and so this was informing some of the judge's opinion. But so even before FDA had regulatory authority over tobacco products, they definitely had regulatory authority over medicines.
Right.
So if I go out there and cause a big uproar about how the tap water from my house cures cancer, and I successfully start marketing that water, the FDA is going to be sending me a nastygram and wanting to know where my research is. Yes, FDA actually did have authority to step in and regulate these products as medicines if that's how they were being marketed.
Right.
And so the decision that came out of that case was, as long as these companies are not marketing these as therapeutic products, they can remain on the market. In addition, the judge sort of pontificated, I guess, that that these products may eventually fall under FDA's tobacco authority.
Right.
So the suit itself did not deem them tobacco products or put them under FDA. FDA had to come back and do that, and I'm sure that we'll get to that in further questions.
Yeah, and I think that was not. It wasn't the Tobacco Control Act. It was like the Family Tobacco something or other, I think.
Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act.
Because I think that was under Obama.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So because of that, like bringing us up to from that point, that was 2009. So from there, I mean, because we've basically battled this since 2009. And because a lot of people people that hear about it, they're like, well, why is this happening now? And you're like, it's not. This is this has been going on for a decade. Because a lot of people said, well, why is vaping under tobacco when it's not? These are not tobacco products. There's no tobacco in them. Why are they under tobacco? And that's kind of the background as to why that is, because it was coming down to the decision of, are they going to be regulated as a medical therapeutic device, or are they going to be, I guess, more of like a I don't know what they call that, like a recreational, leisurely tobacco product or whatnot.
Just tobacco product.
Yeah.
And that's to put a finer point on it. It's the definition in statute. So it's the tobacco product is anything made or derived from tobacco. And that's what we're working with. So it goes all the way back to that.
Okay.
Tobacco
and that's kind of, because we have this assumption or presumption that like, well, vaping is different. So why don't we have our own category? Why is it still tobacco? And it's like, well, that's why. That's where that comes from. And I think it's one of those hypotheticals, like, obviously we would be in a worse place if they were deemed therapeutic. Like we would not have the industry that we have now. And there's really no changing that now. I mean, at this point, but, and so I guess, and I know we're doing broad strokes. And so the current battle that we have now, we've led up to this point. We've rallied and fought until, was it 4 years ago or so? Whenever the deeming regs started coming out, do you want to touch on the deeming regs that we're currently facing, like with the PMTAs and like the danger of everything collapsing?
Yeah. So actually, this all happened. One of the first things I did when I joined the board at CASAA was help edit our comment to the FDA about the proposed deeming rule, and that was in 2014. So 6 years ago, more than 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, the FDA has to go through this rulemaking process. It's notice and comment. And so they put up the proposed rule and they give everybody, I think we initially had, I think it might have been 60 days.
I know it was really short. And I think this happened while I remember I was in Chicago. It wasn't one of it was one of the first couple of vape bashes. And I think it was in May. I want to say it was like May 10th. Because there was some weird irony that it was like 510 or something.
That's 2016.
Okay, that's right.
But yeah, in 2014 they came out with the proposed rule, and we all got to comment on it. And I think they originally gave us like 60 days, and so everybody fired off, requests for extension. I think we ended up with 120. But this is a 500-page document.
Yeah.
So everybody had to pore over it, and we submitted our comment. And I mean, there was a lot of response to this. And it took 2 years for FDA to get back with their final regulation. Some of the stuff that people may not know about or have heard about, it was originally going to be a lot worse. We actually, someone leaked an industry guidance document from FDA in November, I think, of 2014, maybe 2015. Whenever it was, our membership jumped like 40,000 in like a weekend because of this one document that was hinting at a flavor ban.
Right.
And as it turns out, the original final rule that FDA sent to the Office of Management and Budget, which some people have heard about in the news not too long ago, the OMB is where like bad regulation goes to die. It's a White House office, and so OMB reviewed the rule and saw the flavor ban and just took it out, acknowledging that it would have such a devastating economic impact. In 2015 or 2000, even maybe early 2016, they knew that this was going to have dire consequences. And then in 2016, it actually came out on May 5th or May 6th. I was in Albany. I was walking around with the New York CASAA people, and I woke up I went to bed that night knowing that we were probably going to see something released the next day, and then woke up and just notifications, and people going crazy in our Facebook group. I haven't had my Facebook notifications on since that day.
Right.
And then, like you said, the official publishing of the final rule in the Federal Register was on May 10th.
Yeah.
So 5/10.
Yeah.
And Mitch Zeller claims there was no shenanigans involved, but we all know better.
That seems, yeah. And for the people that don't know, 510 was it was the type of atomizer that was probably the most popular at the time.
Yeah, it's the connection. So it's that.
Yeah.
Do the review thing. There you go.
Yeah. which is still
510.
like that's the going universal thing right now. I mean, nobody really calls it a 510 anymore. I didn't think about it. You just said that it's that's the screw in connection is 510. And
you don't have what were they 801s and something. There was like 3 or 4 different.
Yeah, there was 801. There was 401, which it's funny. I started with a 401. I still have it right here. This was my 401 that I started with in 2009. And there was a 401 connection. There was a 306. There was an 801, a 901, and then later came the 510. And which it was funny because the 510 was like one of the last ones to come in, and that's the one that caught on. Everybody, for whatever reason, everybody stuck with the 510. And so it was always kind of, there was a lot of subtle irony with that deeming date being 510. And so from that, we've had a lot of, one of the biggest pushes against vape. Oh, and the 808. I forgot. Yeah, the KR 808s. That's right.
I knew there were some letters involved in one of them.
One of the big pushes that we kind of face, and I say we as in anyone vaping, whether you're aware of it or not, is there's always been a lot of deeming flavor bans. That there's always the cries of the flavors attract children. This is all blah blah blah, which again insinuates adults don't like flavors, which is kind of ludicrous. But it seems to be like that's one of the biggest things that they push for first. Is that fairly accurate that they try to go after flavors because they can use that angle? Like, I don't know. I don't want to assume that they use that angle, but that's a very common thing, is that a lot of states started, even back then, started pushing against flavors because that was for whatever reason. I don't know. Do you
Yeah. Well, no, you've got, I think, the gist of it there. And so anything pre-2013, I was sort of blissfully unaware of. I was still smoking. I saw ecigs in a truck stop in New Jersey in 2008 and was like, what is this fake cigarette crap? Like, right. I'm not, give me 2 packs of Kool. I'm fine. I don't need this electronic stuff. So I did at the last VTA conference, part of my presentation, I went back through all the old CASAA calls to action, and I found something. I think it might have been 2010. I can't remember when our first website went up, but so it was either late 2009 or 2010, and it was a flavor ban in New York. And my point was to the audience that this has been going on for 10 years. I mean, it's going to go on for 10 more years. If anybody thinks that we're going to knock this out in an administration, anybody who thought that Donald Trump was going to save vaping, I think has their expectations need to be realigned.
Yeah.
Because this is a long fight. So yeah, to your point, this has been going on for more than a decade now.
Yeah. And so they would kind of start with they would start attacking flavors, and some states are, I guess, and this is an area where I don't keep up with a lot as much as I used to. There are states that have there states that have flavor bans? I feel like there are, right? That some they've banned flavors entirely.
Yeah. So New Jersey, I believe, was one of the first. Massachusetts. Massachusetts was a bit weird because they banned sales of vapor products during the whole lung injury thing.
Right.
Of course, all of the dispensaries were back up and running pretty quickly, but the vape shops remained closed. And I think before that ban lifted, the state passed legislation banning flavors other than tobacco. And I think Rhode Island also, by way of their health department, implemented a flavor ban. Wisconsin tried and failed. New York, of course, that was how we started the pandemic, was Governor Cuomo shoving a bunch of really unpalatable policy into a must-pass budget bill. I was watching the New York State Legislature at 1:30 in the morning, debating our section of the section that we were in the budget. There was one member who stood up and opposed the flavor ban. There were other members there that were opposing. I think there was some bail reform stuff that got rolled back. Some stuff that in 2020 really needed to be changed,
right?
But was not because of the budget. So yeah, I'm honestly a bit surprised that what happened in the New York State Legislature did not get more coverage in other parts of the state. It was pretty horrible. This was, New York City was locked down. Other regions of the state were locking down. And if you wanted to oppose anything in the budget bill during these last minute debates, you had to drive your ass to Albany and show up.
Yeah.
And this was back when everybody was like, if I touch the doorknob, am I going to get sick? So, I mean, it was pretty ridiculous. Nothing more undemocratic than shutting people out of the process. But I get it. New York needs a budget. So, fortunately, we're not all, destitute and out on the street. Not that Governor Cuomo's really helped me with any of that, but certainly, yeah. So, California is a bit of a tricky / interesting situation. Their anti-vaping law, SB 793, was passed and signed. Gavin Newsom had a little private Zoom party with some of the PAVE moms. They celebrated their horrible bill.
Yeah.
But almost immediately following it, actually Reynolds funded the signature gathering for a referendum on that bill. They collected over 1 million signatures. I think they needed between 600 and 700,000. So they over collected, which is good. And it means that verifying the signatures, that process is quicker or easier. And so they're still waiting for confirmation, but once all the signatures are verified, that flavor ban goes on hold. So it'll be on hold for 2 years until the next election in California and the referendum is on the ballot. There's a cynical view of this, which is that really what the reason why established tobacco companies will pour money into something like this is because it protects sales of menthol. It is cheaper for them to throw millions of dollars at a referendum signature gathering campaign than it is to lose sales of menthol. And even if they just get to keep it for 2 years. So this is one of those examples where, it may not be purely to protect vapor products or purely to protect reduced risk products, but it's one of those areas where tobacco companies are actually being helpful.
Yeah.
They can fund a lot of this stuff. At the end of the day, they are accountable to their shareholders, and so that's where they're going to put their lobbying power. But there are opportunities to use some of that to our advantage.
Yeah.
So I went completely off the flavor ban topic there, but
no, you brought up
and we
good
will,
points.
if you live in a town or a city and you don't have a flavor ban yet, you might see one in the next 2 years.
Yeah. And flavor bans. So two segues from what you said. So, can you detail what a flavor ban actually entails? So that way we have a baseline of of what flavors they consider appropriate and not appropriate. And then what you mentioned about tobacco companies. Are there, a lot of people take it as the tobacco companies are our enemy, which that's really not necessarily the case, because they're still making billions of dollars. They have more money than God, and a lot of it, I mean, at least from my perspective, it seems that a lot of it is really more the medical side of things. Big pharma is kind of more of our enemy, if we had to term an enemy. That tobacco is not necessarily the enemy of vaping. It seems to be more medical based, but I don't know if do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I know that there are people out there who have actually been tracking this stuff and do a really good job of laying out, the follow the money chart. Actually, Danielle put together a really good video on this that was related to the Master Settlement Agreement, I believe, and it shows this trail of funding through, I'm fairly confident pharmaceutical companies are involved, the federal government getting, this stuff getting filtered through CDC, NIH, or other grant writing foundations, and ending up in the hands of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and the Truth Initiative, and then that goes out to, all of the other people. It's just spider webs of all the state and local tobacco control groups, and then you got American Heart Association, American Cancer, American Lung Association. Out of the three of them, American Cancer Society has been the most enlightened. That's not really saying much, but they have said things that are not absolutely horrible, so yes, flavor bans.
Yes. So flavors include what? So what is with the flavor ban? What exactly does that mean as far as what flavors are allowed and what is acceptable as a flavor? What is not a flavor? What are they trying to get rid of, and what are they allowing to stay?
So it depends on where you are. There are several different versions of these. The most extreme version is anything other than tobacco is prohibited for sale,
which includes menthol.
That would ban mint, menthol, and wintergreen.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of who's got the most extreme one. There is a state with that. I'm fairly certain of it. I'm also confident there are multiple municipalities in California that have banned everything except for tobacco.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. It's in Washington State. I want to say it's the county. It's not King County. It's a different county. It's where Tacoma's in it. I don't know. It's wherever Tacoma, Washington is, the county that they're in, implemented a flavor ban, and the state, the advocacy group there fought back and won a lawsuit against that. But then the state came in. This was during the lung injury stuff, and they banned flavors, and so shops were just selling bottles of tobacco flavor. And actually, Tacoma was the only trip I had this year.
Yeah.
I flew out there to, do a NPR media hit, and Kim Thompson was shutting down one of her stores in Tacoma. So it was sort of a going out of business party / here's an opportunity to talk to a national media person. And everything on the wall was just tobacco flavor, it was just ridiculous. I mean, here's this really, otherwise really nice vapor shop. If these people have poured their heart and soul into these businesses, you want to walk into some of these places, and they're just getting kneecapped by the state. So, tobacco flavors. That's what a lot of people are going to be left with. I don't know about all of the vape shops where I live, but I know that the guy right downtown, Plattsburgh Vape Company, he's had to retool his business model. So he's still kind of actually I haven't been in there since he reopened, but he had to shut down and rejigger things so that he could open up and still cater to his customers. I'm sure he's selling, CBD and apparel and maybe some tobacco stuff. It's weird. I live in a very small town, a small city, but we are sort of the center of the North Country up here. So there's like 4 or 5 smoke shops in between the city and the town of Plattsburgh. It's kind of bizarre. There's only 20,000 people here. So
yeah. So it's basically getting rid of everything but tobacco, and which, like you were saying, and not to get too political, but there's a lot of I don't know what the word I'm trying to find. Getting rid of menthol can also be considered a very targeted against certain groups of people. And so it's very interesting, like you were saying, with the tobacco companies stepping in, that menthol, I mean, obviously people still, and I think you said, did you smoke menthol?
Oh yeah. I smoke Cools.
And that menthol is considered a flavor, that it's not just tobacco, it's considered a flavor. And so there is a lot of supposition that, like that's a very targeted thing, and that's, there's a few layers to that as well. But yeah, so I mean, and as for vaping, looking at my desk, I have blueberry, I have pancakes, I have more blueberry. I'm a fan of blueberry. Raspberry, like I actually, it's funny, Adam from Nickwood, like I was sick the other day. I didn't have Corona, but I was sick, and I was like, I don't have any menthol. And menthol vaping is amazing for congestion. Like that's not a therapeutic claim, but there's something of it. It's like inhaling Vicks, like people, you put Vicks on your neck and you sleep and you cleans out your sinuses. Like menthol vaping, I don't know. It's almost like it's magical. But I was never like, I didn't really enjoy menthol cigarettes, but I enjoy menthol vaping on occasion. It's one of those, like, I never really got into it like full time, but it's one of those, like, it's nice to have a change. But yeah, so I mean, if we're just left with tobacco, then it's like you're taking away, like, so many people stopped tobacco because we didn't enjoy burning tobacco flavor, that we enjoyed other flavors. And that is, if they get rid of flavors like that, that's going to ruin, I mean, it's going to ruin everything. Do you think the vaping, I mean, is there what am I trying to say? Is there an idea, like, do you think people would adjust to just having tobacco, or are we at risk, like we generally say, you're forcing us to go back to smoking? If you're taking away all of our options, you're pushing us back toward tobacco instead of helping us have a less harmful alternative. Is that a tricky question?
No, but man, it's a dense question that deserves a dense answer. First of all, I will defer to the flavor artists at e-liquid companies as far as what they can do with tobacco. I've had some interesting tobacco flavors over the years. And that one is, I think, really going to hinge on how those particular products are marketed.
Yeah.
Tobacco certainly has its own flavor wheel,
Right.
and those are notes that experts in making flavors can make sing.
Yeah.
So if we are stuck with tobacco flavors, there's still some variety there, but something I've noticed in some of the tobacco flavors that I've vaped is there's always going to be that reminder of what it was like to smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
And that's a really dangerous place to put people who are vulnerable to going back to smoking.
Right.
The analogy is you wouldn't ask an alcoholic to go hang out in a bar,
Right.
or come to your, bachelor party where the wine is flowing.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering alcoholic. I know I'm not supposed to. The names have changed, but
Yeah.
one of the first social events that I went to when I got out of rehab was a grand opening of a club in downtown Lancaster, and I was doing really well. I've never smelled wine from
Yeah.
across the room before. It's not a very wine on people's breath is not very appealing.
Right.
I didn't notice that until I got sober. But I'm in this big room. I'm with friends. I know, I'm with somebody I know who isn't going to be drinking, and I'm smelling all of this. And all it took was for one person from my recent past experience in recovery to come up to me. This person was obviously inebriated, or they were suffering some sort of head injury. I don't know. But it just shook me to my core. And I experienced, I was in that moment a little bit triggered.
Yeah.
And being in a bar with that going on was a pretty dangerous spot for me. So, all of the advice, and there's nothing, requiring me to go to the bar. Although the advice says don't go to the bar.
Yeah.
So, the practical advice to somebody who picks up vaping is pick a flavor from the dessert and beverage world that you really enjoy, and you might enjoy that very different and appealing flavor in a vapor product. Get away from the taste of cigarettes. It really helps. So now, through regulation, that added layer of support or added enticement to get to a smoke-free product is being taken away. And so people are being forced to use what is arguably the least effective product and the least enjoyable of all the vapor products. And this isn't just something that diehard hobbyists that have been around since the beginning of, since they were making filler for cartomizers out of the blue foam. This shows up in the market data. This shows up in the research. The least popular flavor is tobacco.
Yeah. And I mean, because the only, honestly, I didn't even start with tobacco flavors when I started vaping. I had some because that was a key, it was much smaller back then, but it was you can have tobacco and you would have your simulated cigarette flavors, which are never accurate, but I did have a tobacco. It was a Canadian company, and it was it was like a maple wood something or other, and but even things like that, it's I think about the really good tobaccos that I've had in vaping, and a lot of them have other notes in them that are not tobacco, that like the maple stuff, like maple wood tobacco things, and which again, I'm assuming they're going to not allow maple flavor in tobacco. And another popular vaping flavor was RY4, which is caramel and vanilla. And so they're not going to really allow that. I'm again assuming because it's not a tobacco.
Yeah, and it's weird, or it's not weird. It's one of the dodgy points of some of this flavor ban regulation is how they enforce it, and it has to do with the way that it's written says, if the product imparts a flavor, through taste or smell other than tobacco, then it's reasonably assume that it's a flavored tobacco product. So they can get you on the marketing, but then an actual, inspector can come in and, sample the liquid. And well, if you've ever tried e-liquid off, your finger,
Yeah.
it's sweet. It's
Right.
sweet no matter what flavor it is.
Yeah.
And I almost guarantee you that somebody could take a bottle of just straight up tobacco flavored e-liquid, put a drop on their tongue, and they're going to come back and say, there's no way that's tobacco flavor.
Right. Because of all
So,
the PG and VG it has a definite sweet flavor to it. The base components of the liquids have a a rather sweet flavor, and
right.
and which ironically most of the flavoring is usually pretty bitter. Like all the concentrates and stuff. Like if you took strawberry concentrate flavoring, it's usually very bitter. But for whatever reason, the way it mixes in it, like just like making candy, making hard candy or something. If you drink that concentrate, it's terrible. But
Right.
it in candy for some reason it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it
Well, that's Loran's sells. I started kind of messing around making candy with like sugar substitutes, but Loran's sells 1 gram of concentrated flavors, and I mean you pour that into a batch with several cups of sugar, and I haven't done it properly yet,
Yeah.
but I assume that it will be delicious when I do.
That's what it's funny. I started with Loran's because we didn't really have flavor companies. I mean, I guess they existed in a smaller fashion or a different market. But I went to Hobby Lobby and bought Loran's flavoring. And that's
Yeah.
like I started mixing stuff right away. And I actually had a conversation with I don't know what his title was. He was a person in Cabela's because I had emailed and asked a few questions or something and ordered some things. And like a day later, I got a phone call and he's like, "Oh, I'm so and so from Cabela's." And like, it's like, you don't have to talk to me, obviously, but I'm just curious, like, are you using this with this new e-cigarette thing? And like, I had a big long hour conversation with him back, again, 2009, 2010, and kind of explained, like, this is kind of what we do. Is this flavoring, like we mix it with this stuff, and I'm like, you probably have a big market on your hands that that's going to at some point take off. Like you're probably sitting on a lot of money that you didn't even like there's a market that you didn't even realize existed because it just happened. And which I'm assuming a lot of those candy flavored companies, they were probably like, why are people buying 32 ounces of strawberry flavor? Like, who's doing all this? And yeah, I mean, and that kind of goes back to how we talk about the less harmful side of it, is that it's essentially you're looking at 4 chemicals. You're looking at propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, nicotine, and then flavoring, which the flavorings that are being used are assumedly 100% used in food additives or food flavorings, and things that we would consume on a normal everyday basis already. Like it's the liquids that we're using for non-vapors, I guess I should say. None of these are strange, unique chemicals that are designed just for this. Like this is all stuff that existed before we started vaping, and they found this magic combination of you put this stuff together, and the propylene glycol stuff was actually that's what's used in a fog machine to it you heat it to a temperature and it turns into a fog and then it dissipates, and so I mean that's kind of just what it is. It's like the idea of taking a fog machine and you put flavor in it, and somebody figured out you could vape that.
Well, I will just to clarify, one of the things that I get little red flags about nowadays is is that talking point of, like, well, it's just 4 ingredients. In reality, the flavorings themselves are made up of multiple ingredients,
Right.
and as I understand it, just that's a pretty fun and interesting story that you called Cabela's and said, hey, what about this vaping stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it from other people who have gone on to work for the flavor houses. They didn't know where this bump in sales was coming from, and they had to adapt. It took them a couple of years. And so what I think they have done this is you will have two separate departments. You'll have one for food and beverage, and then another one would be for the tobacco products. And there are issues there, of course, especially for international companies. I think you run into issues with having a tobacco-oriented component to your business. And certainly there are liability issues too, because while all of these flavoring ingredients are what's called generally recognized as safe for ingestion, there is not really a lot of research on how they affect our lungs,
right,
or anything in that path for inhalation.
Right.
So there's still the possibility that there are flavorings out there that just haven't been researched enough that, science will find that there's some concern there. But still, I mean, the overall message here is that it is not likely that anyone is going to find anything in a vapor product that would, raise the level of risk up to where a cigarette is.
Right.
I mean, it's just taking out combustion removes so much of the harm. So, but yeah, when we start doing that sort of number of chemicals versus number of chemicals thing, I always feel like that might be playing into a bit of the chemophobia stuff. Like, I don't know if you remember the Food Babe. She rallied against some ingredient that was in the flatbread and Subway sandwiches.
No, I don't think I saw that.
Yeah, it's an ingredient that is made to use yoga mats. Like, it's totally inert. It doesn't cause any harm, I guess. But maybe, in terms of ingestion, it's not well researched. And why put it in the food if we don't really need it? So whatever, it was that whole thing.
It's like they put sawdust, I think, in food. Like, I'm pretty sure sawdust is like a #1 additive for fiber or something. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I mean, why not? Like, it's just, and it'll just show up as, filler or something.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, does anybody really want to know what goes into a hot dog?
Right,
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Do you want to? There was the big. So two big things. If you wanted to comment on and kind of lay to rest that I do tend to talk about a lot, because people bring it up. Popcorn lung and Ivali.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about those? And you
Sure.
can say no. I mean, if if there's something and you're like, I don't want to talk about that.
No, I just don't want to run afoul of, Twitch's terms of service, or, get you booted off of anything. So
You just can't call people a simp.
Yeah, I'm no weird trigger words for the emotionally frail. Popcorn lung. It has. So I'm a bit conservative in the way I talk about it. So I think most people will say, and this is according to Cancer Research UK, which is not an organization funded by the tobacco industry or the mythical Big Vapor. It is a government total third-party agency. And still to this day on their website, Cancer Research UK states that there has never been a confirmed case of popcorn lung attributable to vaping.
Right.
I, on the other hand, have seen doctors here in the United States making a note that popcorn lung isn't necessarily a full-blown respiratory failure. It can happen gradually, and so some of these doctors, clinicians, they suspect that some of these young patients that they've seen are exhibiting perhaps early stages of bronchiolitis obliterans, which is popcorn lung. I'm not too. I don't offer that up as like a solid kind of rebuttal or to cast any more doubt. It's just when we talk about the conversation that we're having in the States about regulation, I think we have to acknowledge that there is potential for more nuance here, and
right.
We are trying to steer this conversation so that we're not dealing in extremes.
Right.
And so I think it does us well in the long run to acknowledge that there's that there is that sort of sliding scale or continuum of harm that we might see from these products, especially among young people. So, but as far as, official sources are concerned, popcorn lung hasn't happened in anyone who's vaping, and a lot of the lung injuries, not even before the so-called EVALI, can probably be attributed to someone vaping the wrong thing, getting the wrong product. It's, there are bad actors out there in the world, and we hope that regulation, weeds them out and, protects or ensures us with access to clean products. But there are idiots out there. And as we came to find out about EVALI, which, the people who want to have a real adult conversation about this are now just calling it Valley.
Yeah.
They dropped the E because the FDA dropped the E pretty quickly. That's what the CDC should have done instead of dragging their feet for 4 months. So we now know from that experience that we have a problem with this whole drug war in America.
Right.
And so when people are using illicit substances and they end up in the hospital, they don't trust their doctor.
Yeah.
They don't trust the hospital. They're not going to be very forthcoming about their substance use because they're afraid of going to jail.
Right.
And we saw this just case after case during the lung injuries. A 20-something male, I think there was like a 18-year-old boy that showed up to a hospital in New York. Lungs are failing. He's going into a coma. And mom says, well, he vapes the nicotine.
Yeah.
And say, well, that's probably it. Goes home, looks through his stuff, finds the empty THC cartridges and said, nope,
right.
It was this. And that's what the New York State lab confirmed. So it's really weird how this has kind of all panned out.
Yeah.
So all of the credible sources have now changed the conversation to acknowledge that it is entirely likely that 100% of these cases could be linked back to vitamin E acetate in counterfeit or poorly manufactured THC cartridges.
Yeah. And it was all like from one, it was kind of stemmed from one company. Like it was kind of from one source as well, I think, right? Generally accepted, or did they determine it was like multiple, like I guess I had always heard it was kind of like one company, it was like from one place, like one batch or something. But I don't know if that was ever proven.
I don't know about one batch. Certainly, whoever was making it got shut down pretty quickly, or else we would have seen thousands more people injured. But there was a company called Honeycut, and they made this vitamin E acetate. Nobody did any tests on this. Nobody bothered to investigate. This is a problem in the cannabis space where everybody thinks, if you slap organic on it, then it's safe.
Right.
No. Don't vape essential oils.
Yeah.
It hurt you.
Your body doesn't want those in your lungs.
Yeah. I don't care if you know the guy that made it and it was totally organic and cruelty free.
Yeah.
Don't vape it. And there's I think I'm not totally clear on the science on the oils that are used to cut the THC distillate for the cartridges. But certainly vitamin E acetate is not something that you want to put in there. It's good for your skin, not for your lungs. And I think according to some really excellent reporting from Leafly, Honeycut is one of those sources that they were up, their website was up, and they made a big splash in the cannabis world. And then once this happened, they just poof disappeared, and nobody knows what happened to them. So I imagine, yes, that was probably a main source of it, but you know how things spread. Somebody gets the idea that, we cut it with this cheap ingredient, we make more money, so that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Go down to CVS and get some vitamin E acetate. I don't know that CVS sells it by the bottle, but That's
that was that was a really
bad.
weird thing because it was like no one, because when I first heard about that, it was like no one in the history of ever has used vitamin E acetate. Like we have no reason to change the recipe. Like we found like it works and it's worked since they started. So there's no reason that we would, it's not, there was never a point of like, oh, well, buying a drum of VG, I can't do that. I'm going to have to buy vitamin. It's like nobody did that. There was never, and it's so funny because it still comes up that it was such a big thing that people are getting sick from vaping. And I feel like I've possibly had like ruined friendships because of it. Because they're like, well, I know somebody that got sick, and I'm like, no, they didn't. They had something else, or they were doing drugs. Like it's one of those things. Like they had pre-existing conditions. Maybe they had pneumonia, and they also vaped. Like like that's a casual thing. That's not. What is it? That's not a causality. That was a
Right.
casual whatever. Casual link and causal link.
Correlation does not equal causation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's that whole thing. And there's another one that always sticks in my brain, and I'm curious if you have an opinion about this one. When people always talk about, well, I know a guy that vaped and he got pneumonia. Do you have any words about people saying that you can get pneumonia from vaping?
Not a pulmonologist,
Right.
but
We're not doctors.
yeah, not a doctor, not a pulmonologist. But I have a neighbor who is, so maybe I can ask her at some point. Well, what's happened, and I think this, there's a lot of talk in the cannabis community about this, and it's the same thing that we were just talking about with oils.
Yeah.
Lipoid pneumonia was kind of the big thing early on. I think there was a case in the UK. I can't remember how that turned out, but it was either that they were vaping something stupid that they shouldn't have. I don't know if it was a DIY kind of mishap or I don't remember the origins of it, or it was just that the reporting was false.
Right.
The doctor came to the wrong conclusion, and this huge case got blown out of proportion. Policy was erected behind this, and it turns out that no, actually, vaping was not the cause of this person's pneumonia. And that's been, it's the thing that I liken this to is, I don't know if you've ever heard this story about famous, well-known scientists who they progress to a certain stage in their research, especially I guess, sort of your quantum physicist folks. The quest to find the most basic building block of life has gone through several scientists. And usually it's this pattern of they research, they discover, and they get to a point where they just don't believe there's anything more to discover.
Right.
And there's still stuff out there. They know there's still something out there. They just don't think there's anything more to discover. And the rest of it is just God. They literally give it up to God at the end there. And then the next researcher comes along and sort of picks up where they left off and carries the ball. But it's that moment where the scientist kind of gives up, everything defies, further research or whatever, and it's just spiritual something explains the next step. I kind of think that's where doctors are. They've gone through their training. They've probably seen a lot in their practice, and when someone comes in with this new mysterious kind of habit that may have contributed to their current lung condition, certainly it's suspect, well, that must be it. There's no need for further investigation. God has given me the answer. Right. It's the vaping. And so I think there's a lot of that going on, which, when you talk to people in the medical profession, anybody, academia, science, everything, there is this problem with the culture and not necessarily being able to rapidly adapt to new technologies or new behaviors in the population. Doctors are oftentimes they're sort of they're handcuffed and all they can really fall back on is their training, which by the time they open up their practice, is 20 years out of date.
Right.
So these are things that I've picked up from people talking about it. I am not an original source on this, so certainly do your own research. But this is a big discussion in the professional community for medicine and science and research. Yeah.
That's one that it constantly comes up, and because like my typical go-to answer is like, well, were they vaping pneumonia bacteria flavor? Like, was that because it's generally a bacterial infection? It's not, that's one of those things like because I had pneumonia. I was a very, very sick child all the time. And, and it's always like, oh, well, you get fluid in your lungs. I'm like, no, you have, again, not a doctor, but I'm like, you have fluid in your lungs. It's not, your lungs aren't dry. Otherwise they would stick together. Like they wouldn't work. Your lungs are full of liquid. But if you get too much, then it kind of causes problems. And I'm like, tell me how this much liquid is going to somehow, drown me or give me, or flood my lungs, or I don't know. Yeah, that's a whole big thing.
Yeah, and there's other angles to this as well. Like, we know that nicotine temporarily paralyzes the cilia in your lungs. And so if you're a crafty anti-tobacco researcher, you can transform that into a talking point about how nicotine damages your lungs. It paralyzes the cilia. You don't have to explain that it's temporary, or that when it comes from something like vaping that's not putting a whole lot of toxins in your lungs, that sort of no harm, no foul. I mean, the stuff in e-liquid is all water soluble.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you don't want to go drown yourself, but you're not going to just,
Yeah.
I mean, you could sit there and vape an entire 30 ml bottle in a few hours, and might be a little uncomfortable. I've certainly vaped enough to the point where like I feel like there's some moisture getting hung up, but done.
Right.
That's,
right. Yeah, and like somebody was
again, if you're a crafty tobacco control researcher, you translate that to it's lung irritation.
Yeah,
and that sounds scary.
And like somebody was saying in chat, like, I mean, from a hot shower, because or going to like a sauna or like a steam room or something, like you're just inhaling water. Or you live in Florida where the humidity is 90% every day. I'm like, you're just breathing water. Like, those people should be getting pneumonia if your basis is you're getting fluid in your lungs. If you're breathing 90% humidity, you're just getting fluid in your lungs, and you're not getting sick and you're not dying. So it's one of those things that it just seems like, do you have to be I mean, again, doctors are smarter than us, but I'm like, I feel like you don't necessarily have to be a doctor to kind of make that basic jump to be like, maybe that doesn't quite make sense to me. But
yeah, and for the people who use these products, I think some of the best advice is listen to your body.
Right.
The people that don't want you to behave a certain way are going to tell you all kinds of horrible things about what you're doing and why you should change. But none of them can walk in your skin. They don't know what your lungs feel like. They don't know what your brain feels like. You have to listen to what your body's telling you. And yeah, there are going to be some people out there who vaping is just absolutely the wrong thing for them.
Right.
That's fine. And unfortunately, they're going to have to find that out the hard way.
Yeah.
I found out I don't like a lot of stuff the hard way too. It's part of being an adult. Suck it up, kiddo.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, it's, there's no universal prescription for safety, honestly. It's, we just have to, I think, just be a little bit more patient with ourselves and listen to what's going on inside. And, we can probably make a pretty good decision without bothering our doctors.
Right. Well, it's like people bitch at me for drinking Diet Mountain Dew. They're like, aspartame is bad for you. Like, well, I can show you just as many studies that aspartame is just fine. You can show me 50% of them are bad and 50% of them are fine. So for me, it's not causing me any problems. So kind of like you said, it's, you kind of have to see what is your body going to tell you about it.
And I'm guessing that one of those studies that you can point to would probably conclude that you need to drink some, a 50-gallon drum of whatever in order to have some sort of harm. So
Yeah, because it's
yeah,
always
yeah.
like they tested it on rats. They gave them a pound of it, or I'm like, what? Like the tests that they do with vaping and mice and stuff, where it's like they fill them with like a room full of vapor, and I'm like, it's a mouse. Like, why? How would a person ever do that? And
There's a good Twitter account that's just at in mice,
yeah,
and that's what they respond to studies that are rat, we call them mouse torture studies.
yeah,
um, that yeah, it's just some bold eggs will give you cancer in mice,
yeah,
but it's the I think the rodent studies are maybe in the scheme of things a good jumping off point. It's sort of maybe a proof of concept, or you can use that to say to bolster your request to study human subjects. I don't know, but like nobody should be basing policy off of rat studies. It's
right,
ridiculous.
yeah. So, do you want to give us? Because I think we covered most of the big topics, but the last big topic is where do we stand right now? What is our current threat level? Are we at threat level midnight? Are we?
Yeah. Yeah, we're sort of always at threat level midnight. It's man, and I know people are tired, I think, of hearing this, and I'm tired of it. Advocacy fatigue is real.
Yeah,
Um, so, yeah, what's going on right now is the FDA's PMTA compliance deadline kicked in, September 8th, I think. So we've been living under PMTA, federal PMTA enforcement for a few months now, and honestly, the places that are seeing the most damage done to the small businesses are the state and city level. The FDA is just not staffed to handle enforcement at this scale.
yeah,
They will likely be, something that we've seen from them and have suspected all along. They will go after the most egregious offenders. And it's really weird. I am probably, uh, I, I have to preface a lot of things by saying I'm not sort of a seasoned analyst or expert or some of this stuff, especially when it comes to regulatory affairs. But we got a lot of favors from FDA over the past 2 years. Not really favors. I think it's more of like FDA actually, or at least the Center for Tobacco Products, grew a spine and stood up for their turf. There is always going to be this effort to regulate tobacco products as a medicine, as a drug. That's how FDA ended up with these regulations to begin with. That's what all of all the crazy anti-smoking groups, that's what they want. They want it regulated as a drug. They want, alcohol style prohibition on nicotine.
right.
You got to get it by prescription only. So oh shit, I lost my thought.
That happens.
They want it regulated as a drug.
We're living under
Bad
PMTA
out
rule.
there. Man, I hate it when this happens. I feel like I was on a roll and then I totally just got derailed. So the current situation is that federal enforcement is going to be kind of slow, and part of the reason for this is that I honestly believe that Mitch Zeller and folks at Center for Tobacco Products, they don't want to ban these products. The FDA has said in court documents that this was in response to the most recent lawsuit, which which set that deadline. Actually, it was supposed to happen in spring, but because of the coronavirus, got pushed back to September. So FDA's response to this lawsuit, which wanted to sort of retroactively enforce this deadline, if Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and American Academy of Pediatrics was sort of lead on the case, and if they had gotten their way, the PMTA deadline would have been kicked back to August 8th, 2018.
Right.
And immediately everything would have been totally illegal.
Yeah.
But the FDA responded or Mitch Zeller responded in his brief or declaration to the court that the FDA is concerned that if there was a mass exodus or mass removal of these products from the market, that potentially many people would return to smoking, which is a net public health negative.
Yeah.
And, and part of this is also, we've had Scott Gottlieb come out and not necessarily defend flavors, but make room for discussion about the value that flavors have. And I think people at FDA have acknowledged this, and certainly getting that section cut out of the deeming rule from the White House under Obama certainly probably had an impression on them to reconsider that, reconsider having such an aggressive approach. And we saw the announcement about how FDA would be doing enforcement. Again, as a result of this court case, FDA maintains their discretion when it comes to enforcement. And FDA has laid out that they are going to go after the companies that are clearly marketing products to young people. Now, there's some debate about how you figure that out.
Right.
I would imagine if companies are advertising on certain social media platforms or not being too careful about where online advertising shows up, we've heard reports of kids playing, what was supposed to be an educational app, getting an ad for, a local vape shop or something. Not that the local vape shop intended that to happen. It's just they used a service that wasn't very careful about where they're placing their ads. So certainly when it comes to marketing, there's a lot of things that can evolve, and we can fix these things. The industry can fix these things. You can work with government and set down some pretty reasonable guidelines, and we can still see these things. We don't have to hide these amazing products that are helping millions of people, under a sheet. So
FDA, what happens if we don't? Okay, so everybody has filed their PMTAs, which are that's a whole other discussion. So we'll just say they've filed their PMTAs, and number one, because I don't think I've heard this, has anybody been approved? And number two, I don't remember if they changed the grandfather date. I thought. So the original idea was, if you're not approved and your product was on the market after the grandfather date, then it could be deemed illegal and removed from the market. And I know the original grandfather date was like 2008 or 7 or something. And I thought somebody said that they thought that changed, but I was not aware that it actually changed.
No, I think the source of the confusion is probably in the deeming rule itself. So the original grandfather date is February 15th, 2007. That is an arbitrary line in the sand. It has more to do with when the Tobacco Control Act was introduced. There's nothing significant that happened in tobacco product manufacturing or whatever before or after that date. It was just line in the sand. So that is the universal grandfather date. Anything on the market prior to that does not have to go through this extensive pre-market review. The other date that I think kind of trips people up is August 8th, 2016. That was the original effective date of the deeming rule. And it said that any product introduced to the market after August 8th, 2016 automatically had to go through the PMTA process. But if you had something on the market prior to that, you could stay on until 2018 when they were going to start enforcing the PMTA deadline.
Right.
And that's the date that has changed. So when Scott Gottlieb came in, it was July of 2017. There was a big announcement, and they laid out sort of a little bit of a rejiggering of priorities in how they were regulating nicotine. And that was the talk, where the speech where he said, we're not so much looking at tobacco regulations as we are looking at nicotine. And so that pushed the date back to 2022.
Okay.
It was 2022 for non-combustible products and 2021 for combustible products. And then, of course, that got wiped out by the lawsuit. So the deadline, the PMTA deadline has changed several times. And yes, we are talking about two kind of different grandfather dates.
Right.
And that 2016 date is still important because I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today. When these companies are going and submitting their applications, that you need to assume that the FDA is going to be reviewing your marketing and reviewing what you've been selling as long as you've been in business. And so if you've been introducing new products after 2016, there's a reasonable concern there that FDA might ding you for that.
Yeah.
So just something for people to be really aware of. But I think there's a lot of companies that, look, it's business. You have to remain competitive.
Right.
Part of the reason why vaping, took off the way that it did was that hype of new products coming out all the time. So a lot of companies tried to sort of, do an end run around that 2016 date. A lot of people rushed to introduce products before that deadline. Some of them were successful and some of them weren't.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to find that out in a pretty painful way.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so, to my knowledge, I haven't heard anything about it. What has anybody been approved? Has anybody's PMTA for vaping? Has anything been approved by the FDA to be a valid after this deadline stuff? Like, do we have any FDA approved or authorized? I don't even know what the term they're using.
Authorized.
Authorized. Yeah, because it's not approved, I guess. They've authorized the sale of the item, but has anyone made it past that yet, or is everything still under research or under investigation or whatever they're doing? And like, I don't think there's anybody that's actually become authorized yet, right?
Right. So yeah, no vapor product has received market authorization from FDA. Where we're at right now is FDA just experienced the crush of a bunch of applications being submitted. I think there's one woman whose company submitted. I believe she claims something like 300,000 products or 300,000 SKUs. I don't know if that's all in one application or if she actually submitted 300,000 different applications.
Wow.
And that's not necessarily trolling the FDA. That's somebody maybe not understanding that they can group a lot of things or whatever. But I think FDA is going to get a lot of very cumbersome applications, people trying to be as diligent as they can. And the other thing about this is that nobody really expects, certainly not in the open vapor side of the industry, nobody expects these applications to be totally complete. Even Reynolds and Altria and Swedish Match, there is a back and forth between these companies and the agency, and that's part of the substantive review process. And so that's where we're at right now. Is all of these companies are submitting applications, and then they're getting response letters from FDA saying we have either accepted your application for substantive review or your application isn't in an acceptable form.
So they are telling, because I remember hearing early on that they were not going to get a notification either way, so it sounds like they're at least saying we've accepted your documentation or application, and they're telling them that we're not accepting it. So they are actually giving them acknowledgement, I guess.
I'm not clear about rejection letters, but yeah, people are getting letters acknowledging that their application has been accepted.
Okay.
Which is an important step for people who don't know. I mean, this is laid out in the statute. Once your application is accepted, you have a year to keep your product on the market while FDA reviews. It has been taking FDA longer than a year. It's been taking FDA longer than 2 years to get through a single PMTA application. By the time IQOS hit shops in Atlanta, it was already outdated. They were already on version 3. So that's how long the process takes going through FDA.
Yeah. Funny segue. I was getting gas today. they always have adverts for, Black and Milds and weird ecigs and stuff like by the gas pumps. They have nicotine toothpicks now.
Yeah.
In the gas station. And
the Pixatine.
Yeah. And I saw the sign and I took a picture of it and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, did they? But I guess that's not a tobacco product. So it just made me wonder, because we were going to talk tonight, and I was like, what did they have to do? Like,
they have to do the same thing?
Do they have to go through PMTA?
Product.
Since it's nicotine and the nicotine would be derived from tobacco, they would consider that a tobacco product. Yep. And so I wonder, yeah, that's really interesting. It was what I'd never heard of it, and I saw it, and I'm like, I'm going to have to look into that further. And I was curious if that was a thing.
I think I have a little canister somewhere it's buried in a box somewhere, but yeah, somebody gave me a canister of those, the Pixatine. I think I used one. It's, I'm not a toothpick person.
Right.
I don't need to try to look tough.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's got nicotine on it.
Yeah. Interesting. Is there anything big that we've missed? I mean, I feel like we've hit all the high points at least. Because of course, we're talking 10 years of knowledge, that all this stuff is going on for, and it is kind of sometimes difficult to kind of summarize and be like, here's what's happening that you need to worry about. I guess, well, the other part that we haven't hit on is what, as an individual, as a person, as a consumer, what can we do? Go to CASAA. That's the answer, is go to CASAA. Go to CASAA. And because with CASAA, you guys, you can sign up for free, and then you can get notifications of pending laws, or that's the terminology where I get lost on, but new regulations, city ordinances, things like that, where something is coming up that is related to vaping, whether they're trying to push a flavor ban or whether they're trying to push an all-out ban, any kind of ordinance or regulation or anything that's coming up in a city or a locale or a state. That's kind of where CASAA comes in, is that you push out that information to people for them to try to be proactive. And like with the recent thing with the postal, the mail thing, that and it's very simple. Graham sent it to me, and he's like, hey, do this. And so I looked and I was like, okay. And I sent it to somebody else that was in chat right now. And you just go in and you put in your information, you click a button, and it's done. Like, you guys make it super simple. And then the next step, like the more difficult step, I guess, is getting people to try to call, or getting people to go down and try to lobby, or try to have one-on-one conversations with legislators and senators and stuff like that. And so as an average person, what is it that a person can do to aid in this fight against tyranny?
Well, always be informed, and that's the other focus of what we put out there for resources. So our website's good for joining. Definitely join. It's free, and we don't send out a ton of email. So
right.
It seems to me that people have a different threshold for what they consider excessive.
Right.
But I seriously very rarely send messages out to the entire membership. But it is fundraising season. So, well, we did Giving Tuesday. But we got to put our adult pants on and start actually asking people for money.
Right. Which I know there's a big push for that in the not too distant past. And so is there another push for that happening now, like for the new year, or is how does that work? Like, and people can, I guess they can find all that information on the website if they want to go, and if they want to donate, or if they want to, whatever assistance they want to offer, I guess they can probably find that information on the website.
Yeah, no, it's very clear how to donate and how to get involved. And really, it is take advantage of the resources that we have up there. Learn about the history of these products. We have It's not entirely up to date, but we have a timeline of the electronic cigarette, which will really give you the bulk of how we got to, the products that you see today, and the policies affecting our access to these products. It's another thing to, I think maybe prime people who aren't maybe active in this area, really think long and hard about this conversation that we're having about drug policy reform, winding down the drug war. And I really encourage people to find the parallels between the war on drugs and the war on now nicotine.
Right.
And there are a lot of disturbing parallels. You talk about menthol. There's sort of almost opposing social justice issues when we talk about banning menthol.
Right.
And depending on where you are in the country, possession and use of products is criminalized. And so that, for a lot of people in law enforcement, means if they have to enforce those laws, that's more unnecessary interactions with the citizens that can potentially lead to injury or death of either the officer or the citizen. Most of the time, it's the citizen.
Right.
So that's not something that police officers want.
Right.
And it's not something that the communities of color want. But at the same time, yes, it's true. Yeah. Tobacco companies targeted minorities with menthol.
Right.
They targeted the LGBTQ community. They did all of these things. The operative word here is did.
Yeah.
And they are under a microscope now. So a lot of these talking points are actually kind of hollow, and they're based on practices that ended when the Tobacco Control Act happened.
Yeah.
So maybe not in other parts of the world, definitely not in other parts of the world, but in the United States, there are regulations to prevent some of that stuff. Anyway, I'm getting completely off the rails.
That's I think it's relative for sure.
But yeah, I mean, it is, for the average person, I say, first of all, don't sell yourself short. Everyone should know that your individual story matters. And no matter how hard they try to dismiss us as anecdotes or shills for tobacco companies, they're never going to be able to take away the fact that I accidentally quit smoking by just picking up a vapor product on a whim.
Right.
No tobacco company paid me to do that. No one is paying me to say that now. That is my story. It's always going to be my story, and people need to understand that has power and real value. And the bulk of our work is all about making sure that everyone's stories are getting to lawmakers, right, and that there is a real human face on this issue. It is all too easy, and I've seen it happen all the time. As a matter of routine, this issue is framed as big corporate profits versus public health. And we are in a situation right now where the companies that are rightfully branded as having caused this big cigarette mess are now actually in a position to be a vital part of the solution.
Yeah.
And so part of making sure that we can all make that happen means that we have to acknowledge the experiences of individual consumers, and it's our experiences that have to be informing policy, not just as people who used to smoke or people who currently smoke, but as parents who smoke, right, as professionals who smoke, and of that group, those same people who have switched to vaping or other smoke-free products, and what changes and what benefits or consequences that has brought for their lives.
Yeah.
It's our stories that need to be informing policy and research.
Right.
And right now, it feels like the only people listening to us are the companies.
Yeah.
They are the ones adapting the products to meet the needs of consumers.
Yeah.
They are the ones out there, although they're advocating and protecting their bottom line, they're the ones actually putting money into the fight to, at least get out with, the shirt on our back on the other side.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No. Okay. So there's
10 o'clock for me, and I'm starting to ramble.
Yeah. No. I was looking at the time, and I know you didn't have a whole lot of time. Yeah, because I know the one of the other hurdles that we as any type of, I'm a low class advocate versus a high class advocate, that everything in between, that we are the minority of the voice of vaping, that or as the sorry, not necessarily the voice, but as the, I guess maybe the informed, that you're still looking at like 98% of the people go into a gas station and they buy the ones that the kids buy. They, you know, they go buy a disposable, or they go buy something in a store. They don't really, they're not the hobbyist side of it. And the large, vast majority of people that are vaping are entirely clueless of what's going on. And that's kind of the part that it gets really dangerous, because those people are going to wake up one day with nothing. When vaping, they're going to be like, why is vaping gone? How did this happen? And, you know, so there is that moralistic human side where it's like, we've kind of got to speak for them, because there are a lot of people that have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, ideally, folks can go about their day and purchase their safer alternatives to smoking without having to think about any of this stuff. That's how I want it to be. I want, you know, the selection of vapor products in a gas station to be well lit. I want it to stand out. It should be front and center in the power wall behind the cash register, and I shouldn't have to, you know, bend my neck to look around the cash register to find it. We've got to meet people where they're at. So definitely, you know, vapor products should be sold right alongside cigarettes. They need, they can. We've shown that the industry has shown that they can compete head to head with cigarettes, and they should be not given that opportunity. They should be allowed to take that opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you know, I think part of what you're describing, you know, I think it's true for just about any movement. You have, you know, the people who are able to dedicate their life and time to a particular issue, who then become the most informed, and we have a responsibility to activate people when we can, or when it's appropriate, and not just tell people, hey, look over there, there's a problem. We have to give them the tools to advocate on their own behalf.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, and just, I think, you know, by the numbers actually, and this is another one of those sort of consequences of bad policy, you know, the market share for the closed system devices has dwindled significantly.
Wow.
Since, you know, well, we had the guidance come out from FDA saying, you know, banning, you know, closed systems products in flavors other than tobacco and menthol. So immediately the closed system products were, you know, kneecapped. They couldn't appeal on flavors. And there has always been kind of this about a little bit of back and forth in the balance between closed system and open system. And it really wasn't until Juul came along that balance shifted to the, you know, now the closed system make up more than half of the market.
Yeah.
But with the change in regulations and all the stuff that we're seeing at the state levels, it's now shifted back to, I believe, the most recent estimates, which are they're just estimates because no one is actually tracking the open system side. But the new numbers are showing that open systems are now more than half of the industry in terms of market share.
Interesting. I didn't know that it shifted again. That's that is really interesting. And the other thing that was sticking in my head is, we're talking about with lawmakers and such, and all that stuff. Those people work for us. Like, that's the other thing that people need to remember is your senators, your state senators, your legislators and all that stuff. Like, they work for you. Like, it's not, you know, we have the right to tell them, this is what I think, this is how I feel about this. This is my opinion on the policy that you're considering. Like, those people, they're required, I mean, at least they don't have to pay attention, I guess, but like, they're at least required to hear us, and we have a valid voice to give them. And so, you know, that's one of those areas where it's like, don't feel like you're stepping out of bounds. Like, that's their job is to take our phone calls or to take our letters, and for us to say, this is what I think about your law that you're talking about. Like that's why, I mean, that's how our country works. Thankfully, not all of them do, but that's that's the thing that we have. We have that ability to do that, and so, and I'm guilty as everybody else, like not taking advantage of that to its fullest extent. But yeah, I mean, we have that ability. We have that that right. So yeah, when these things come up and it's like, hey, call your senator or send them an email or something, like don't feel like you're doing something bad or you're stepping on toes. Like that's what you're supposed to do as a citizen. And CASAA gives you the tools for that.
I've been through, plenty of meetings with lawmakers, and probably, one of the more heartening things I participated in was the Albany County Legislature was looking to ban flavors, and this is Albany County, New York, which is also, that's the capital of New York for those not familiar with our geography. So Albany County is the county where Albany, the city, is, and so policy made at the county level tends to have a bit of an influence on stuff being discussed at the Capitol. So it was a really important thing to get engaged on. But these are all detailed. I swear I'm not going to go on another weird tangent here and then be like, I forgot what I was talking about. But after, there was a long meeting of the county legislature, and lots of passionate testimony. And I got to give it up to the hookah people again. There was a young woman that showed up at the end. She's like, I just found out about this. This is ridiculous. You're going to shut down so-and-so's hookah shop? Save the hookah shop. This is ridiculous. It was great. It was a great 5-minute. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And so after the meeting, I believe the chairman or the leader, I forget what his title is, but he was the top guy, sitting on the dais with the gavel. He came out afterwards and said, and thanked everybody for showing up. And it wasn't just because I think he supported the opposition to this new law, but it was that, he genuinely, as a lawmaker, genuinely appreciates it when voters get engaged and actually stand up for themselves. That's why they hold these meetings. And it's impressive, honestly, for them to have allowed people to speak for, I think, 4 or 5 minutes at a shot with that many people signed up to testify. Kudos to the Albany County Legislature.
Yeah.
Most people see a roster with more than 10 people, and they're like, all right, we're cutting this down to 1-minute speeches.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, very, very cool. I won't keep you. I think, was there anything else that we haven't hit on? I mean, I definitely feel like we've hit all the major points. I've been adding the link to CASAA in the chat. We can find you at hello_Alex.
Yep, that's me on Twitter.
On Twitter. And CASAA is it CASAA Media on Twitter?
Yep, at CASAA Media.
Yeah.
CASAA, and then media.
And is there any other links that we should know about? Is there any other? I think that should get everybody to everything, probably.
Yeah, that'll get you started. If anybody wants some, reading for extra credit, check out Clive Bates from the UK, and Brad Radu is an excellent. So we quote him. So you'll run across him on any of the smokeless tobacco stuff that we have. Brad Radu has been doing tobacco harm reduction before tobacco harm reduction was tobacco harm reduction.
Yeah.
He is sort of one of the original, promoters of smokeless tobacco as harm reduction in the 90s, before vaping even became a thing. So very good source there.
Cool. Do you, we can have another chat a different night. I know we've taken up a bit of your time. Do you want to head out and have another conversation later? We can talk about gaming. We can reschedule for another night.
Sure, I can get a little bit more experience under my wing. I'm not like the best gamer talker. I saw you got a lot of Minecraft videos. I've only ever played Minecraft for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I worked for a van rental company and they put Xboxes in them, so I had to test them. And I decided to try Minecraft and didn't get very far. And just said, "Oh, I'm not gonna do that." But
It's a very interesting game. It's a very for me it triggers the logic and problem solving part of my brain. And I think I think it's funny because it's one of those games that for different people it hits different parts of you. That some people like the creative side of it and the artistic side of it, and for me it's like it's the logic problem solving of like I need to make this do a thing. How do I do that? And that's kind of where and we use the term OCD, but I'm not OCD, and that's offensive, I think. But like that's the part of my brain where I'm like, I have to figure this out. Like it's gonna drive me crazy. I'm not gonna sleep until I figure out how to make this thing work. And yeah, for me, it triggers that weird logic part. But yeah, there's a lot of different. I like shooters too. I like the first person shooters a lot.
well, to your love of Minecraft, I get that. I've been playing City Skylines. So I've always been just I'm a total sucker for a city simulator. I played, when SimCity came out, my friends and I, one of our roommates had a computer and we just took over his computer for like a week straight, just, beers and SimCity. It was great. And so now I play City Skylines on a console, which isn't the best way to play it, but it does satisfy that same thing. It's just more of like, oh wait, now I've got a traffic problem. I've got to do I widen the road or create a bypass? It's what traffic management can I do? And I'm a bit of I'm a little bit of a transportation nerd.
Right.
Of all the things to be interested in for hobby, it's how most of my working life I spent behind the wheel of something. So that has translated into a very weird fascination with transportation. So.
Small segue. Have you been to Europe? Have you ever visited Europe?
Yeah.
The transportation over there is mind blowing compared to America. It's absolutely unreal that you can get anywhere you want for a few bucks. Like you get on a bus and then you get on a train and you can go to different countries, and it's absolutely insane. But yeah,
I have not been in Europe as traveling too much. I went to Berlin. My wife used to have an apartment there. She's an artist, so that is part of her deal. And Berlin was what I thought Berlin was great.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard it's amazing.
The first thing I noticed was how quiet it is.
Yeah, actually,
for such a big city, and they have. There's no jaywalking in Berlin. If you cross against the light in Berlin, people start yelling at you, and if you do it in front of a kid, oh my God. So but yeah, it's a really beautiful city, and of course, in the transportation thing again, it's like you can hop on the Straßenbahn and then get to the train station and then take a train to wherever you need to go. It's very nice.
It's crazy that we haven't adapted something like that, but we have too much money in oil.
we really could be. It's the oil and auto thing, but I've always lived I've lived in the Northeast since I was in high school, or like junior in high school, and part of my job was transport. I worked for a van rental company, so I always used to find it amazing that I could walk from my house to the Amtrak station in Lancaster and go all the way up to New York City and then walk or hop on the subway and get to my client and then drive all the way. I would tell friends like, well, I'm walking to New York.
Right.
Because that's kind of what it felt like. I didn't have to drive myself. It was all just foot power with the train and everything. But, in the Northeast megalopolis, the connections are a lot more clear. And you can get from, some weird neighborhood in Boston all the way down to, the White House. And you don't even have to bother with a car.
Yeah.
It's just pretty interesting.
Do you want to take a couple? Oh, my. Sorry, I thought it was echoing. Did you want to take I know we have one question, and it's kind of unrelated. It's what was it? What are your favorite pizza toppings?
Oh man. Well, I made pizza for a while, so
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. It's all about the combinations. Ground beef and banana peppers. That's an excellent pizza. Mushrooms for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Mushrooms, green peppers is a great combination for pizza and cheesesteaks. Actually, when I make cheesesteaks for dinner, sometimes I take the mushrooms and the green peppers and then two slices of American cheese, and I cook it separately. Like I make a cheese sauce,
Right.
and I lay that on top of the steak. Perfect.
The only thing I don't agree with is the mushrooms.
Oh,
I've never been. I don't know. It's a texture thing that I don't like mushrooms. It's funny. I've never had because the only mushrooms. I mean, we're talking like the shitty ones that they put on, chain restaurant pizza places. But
oh yeah, those are from a can. They've been soaking in brine.
right, yeah. Like I've never had like the big fat like the one like portobellas that they make.
Mhm.
They use them for buns or whatever. Like I've never, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could bring myself to try them just because I don't like mushrooms. But I feel like there is that part of me that feels like I could be missing out. That maybe real mushrooms probably taste better than shitty canned mushrooms.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm the opposite actually. Well, I love fresh mushrooms. I love just about any kind of mushroom. The only mushroom I don't like are shiitake mushrooms.
Hmm.
For me they have a texture thing, and there's something with the flavor. It tastes like varnish to me. I
Yeah,
don't know. I just don't know why people like shiitake mushrooms. Um, but I like the canned mushrooms
yeah,
because they're chewy.
right.
It is a different texture. But no, because of stocking up to make sure we have like 2 weeks supply of food and the lockdowns and stuff, we have an abundance of canned mushrooms, which I totally love. And it comes from, I think, working in a pizza shop. Like specifically, I love those canned mushrooms on pizza.
Yeah. Now you're in New York,
Yep.
but you're not from New York, right? I was just gonna
Yeah.
say New York pizza or Chicago pizza.
New York.
Yeah,
Chicago pizza is more like it's like casserole. It's not pizza.
because that is
Don't
one of
find
those. I
anybody from
think that
Chicago about it.
if I remember right, it's because actual Chicago pizza is really more like the giant, like lasagna pizza, right?
Yeah, deep dish it's upside down pizza. The cheese and the toppings go. Well, you've got the crust that goes into the pan, and then the cheese and the toppings go next, and then the sauce goes on top of it. I mean, it's delicious. It's just, I don't know. It's a little much.
Yeah,
Maybe Chicagoans will can call me a lightweight. I don't care. New York City, New York style pizza is great. And look, if you don't, it's like, you ever hear the South Philly lean? You know what the South Philly lean is?
hmm.
When you eat a cheesesteak, you've got to go like
Oh
this
yeah,
so that the juice and cheese doesn't drip all over your shirt. That's the New York style pizza. That's kind of this. You got to fold it. And you got to make sure the oil isn't dripping towards your face.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, just that thin crust and the way the cheese and the sauce mixes together. That's
Yes,
golden.
that's I've never had. I mean, because I've been to Chicago and I've had Chicago pizza, but I've never been to New York, so I've not had New York pizza.
Huh.
It's one of those like it's on the list, and then, of course, the world happened. I didn't have any plans this year, but then the world happened, and I was like, well, I can't go anywhere, like. Because we went to, like I said, we went to Amsterdam in February, and we got back like I think it was like the 23rd, and it was coming right up to the tail end of like when everything was starting, and because it was on our mind even when we went. It's like, should we go? Like there's this brewing thing of like this terrible disease happening, and we're like, sure, we'll go, we'll risk it, whatever, and then we get back and it's like the world's going to shut down, and so like for me that's been the biggest thing is that I can't travel. Like I can't go back to Europe because we were talking about like we should just plan this every year. We should go to Amsterdam but Amsterdam's changing anyway. But like we
Yeah.
should just take a trip. Like we should go to a different country every year and just go explore and go visit. And I think that's been a big thing for me. Has there been anything like as far as like all the lockdowns and everything, like is there a certain thing, like do you have a certain thing that you've always enjoyed that you've not been able to do?
It's weird. Sorry for the dead air.
No, it's fine.
I we have a pretty decent situation here. I mean, we live across the street from a park, so we walk out our front door and we're in a wide open green space, and it's a small town. So, getting out to enjoy the outdoors is something that, I actually didn't do a whole lot this year. It's
Right.
weird. We got a dog. We sort of adopted a dog from my brother-in-law. They have two kids, and it's kind of crazy in their house, and
Right,
so
right.
their dog was just not having it. And my wife and I are just like the chillest people in the world, so we were actually afraid that the dog was going to be bored. Um, but now that we have this dog, you would think like getting out and walking the dog is going to get you outside more. I actually experienced a vitamin D deficiency, I'm fairly certain,
Yeah.
over the summer of all seasons, because I just wasn't going out. I've been more of a homebody than I ever have before. We used to go on, we'd try to walk, 2 or 3 miles a day. There's a nice bike path down by the lake. I'm along we live on Lake Champlain, basically.
Mm.
We're on the old Plattsburgh Air Force Base. If anybody's doing their Google
They're
Map food,
mapping. Yeah.
um, this is there's no way we would be able to afford this house anywhere else. I'll tell you that. But yeah, that's the big thing I think that I'm sort of surprised about is that I just didn't get outside very much, and part of it was I think feeling like, we kind of have to go where the dog goes.
Yeah.
Um, and he's a big dog. He's a standard poodle, so
Oh, okay.
he has a pull when he
Right.
gets excited about another animal. So that's another thing to just be conscious of. So yeah, I just haven't gotten a lot of sunlight. I went through a bit of depression this year. This is the first time that since I've been sober and with my wife that I've experienced like deep depression.
Yeah.
Nothing that I was clinically diagnosed for, but waking up every day with no motivation and
Right.
just no enthusiasm for anything all day long. That was like a month of that, and it turned out like it started because I think I was doing vitamin D dosing wrong.
Mm.
Uh, I was taking like the mega dose, and then I took it on a Wednesday, and then the following Wednesday, for some reason, like in the middle of the day, I was just sad,
Yeah.
and I have to just go back to taking like a smaller dose every day of vitamin D, and that's leveled
Interesting.
things out. So
I've got a really bad vitamin D. My body is terrible. That's a whole other conversation that I've been dealing with and looking into that. But I take a prescribed vitamin D that I take. It's 50,000 units twice a month, and
okay,
because my vitamin, it's like your vitamin D level is supposed to be like a double digit number, and it was like mine was like a 3 or something.
oh wow,
Like it's like it's supposed to be like a 15, and they're like your vitamin D is like a 3, and it's like what? How is that possible? But yeah, and it's funny because I hear that a lot. That I think with since because as kids, like I would play outside a lot, and I think as we've gotten older and as technology has changed our lifestyle, I do kind of feel like we probably spend more time inside rather than being outside, just because we have entertainment. Like we don't have to go outside and like sit on the porch to it's like we have a TV, we have internet, we have phones, and so I think a lot of people are probably suffering vitamin D deficiency and probably don't realize it.
yeah.
And I think it definitely does affect your physiology a lot, probably more than people think. Lake Champlain, have you seen the monster that's in the lake?
No, I've heard tell of the
Champ?
Champy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Champ. It is a float in the local. We have in the Fourth of July parade for sure. There's a Champy float, and then we also have the Battle of Plattsburgh, which was part of the War of 1812, which is some really interesting history that I didn't know until I moved here.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't know that had the Battle of Plattsburgh been lost, everything from the southern border of Quebec down to the northern border of Massachusetts would have been Canada.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It
Yeah, it was a pivotal battle. But I think when people think of 1812, they're thinking of like the Great Lakes and New Orleans, I guess, were where the big battles were going on.
mm,
But yeah, they repelled the British forces here in the Bay of Plattsburgh. Was it Admiral McDonough innovated a fighting technique that involved like spinning the gunship and always keeping the guns facing the British.
huh.
It was it was like a spring pivot or something. They put two anchors in the water and then they were able to quickly turn the boat.
Oh wow.
So when the British came around the bend, they just blew them to shreds. So
We don't have any fun stories like that. We just we had the Dust Bowl and the Depression, and like that's Oklahoma. And
you're in Tulsa, right?
yeah, in Tulsa, and
Yes.
and now the newly the somewhat touchy subject of the race massacre, which they've changed from, it used to be race riot, that now they've changed it to race massacre. Because it was really less of a riot anyway. It was mostly just slaughtering people. It wasn't really much of a riot. It was just white people killing people.
I have to come clean as an ignorant white person that I did not know about the Tulsa massacre until Watchmen came out on HBO. I had no idea that even happened.
Yeah, it's really eye opening. There was that show and another one that was kind of in that kind of time frame earlier. And I don't know if you're a horror fan. I don't know if we ever had a horror conversation. There's a show on HBO called Lovecraft Country, and
I haven't watched that yet. I want to, but I haven't watched
it's really, it got kind of weird, and I need to go back to it. But because I tried to wait. Like, I don't like to watch stuff like on release night because I like to save up a couple, and I've kind of missed the last few. But it kind of was going into a weird direction. Which weird is fine, but it's like I want it to be Lovecraft weird, not just like random. But it's very racially charged, like in the way that Watchmen can make you very uncomfortable when you, again, speaking as a white person, when you watch this, you're like, wow, like we are terrible people, terrible people. And also Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the score for Watchmen. I don't know if you Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails.
I remember seeing his name, and I remember hearing something, and then seeing his name and thinking, "Oh yeah, that made sense."
Yeah. They've been doing a lot of scores lately. Yeah, the Watchmen score is really good. They just did one. I haven't watched it yet. There's another David Fincher film on Netflix about a director, and they did the score for that one as well. It's called like it looks like Monk, but it's not Monk. It's a guy, like his name had those letters in it. It's like Mock or something. Okay. But they did the score for that one too, and I think they did the score for a section of the Pixar film that just came out, the jazz one.
Wow.
There's like, but I saw an interview with them, and they were talking about how, it's like they didn't do the main score, but there's like they didn't give it away, but it's like there's a weird like alternate dimension thing that happens, and they did this score for this particular section of it. Like they didn't, because it's a lot of big band orchestra stuff, and then it's like this other part is like Nine Inch Nails music. But yeah, the Watchmen thing was really interesting because part of it I was like, I want to hear this because I'm just a big Nine Inch Nails fan, and but yeah, the Watchmen show was really good and just very uncomfortable. Like a lot of it was just kind of like wow. But that's very much like a lot of people had no idea that. I mean, it's a very bloody history in Tulsa, which it's very sad, and yeah, I mean they're not turning it around. Like they're doing a lot to kind of bring light to it now, and and kind of look into it further and kind of try to, like, they've been doing a thing now. They've been they think that they're probably mass graves in a lot of places, and they've had companies come in and do this for free, that they're looking up ground sonar stuff and trying to find mass graves and looking for people that were not accounted for and that kind of thing. But yeah, it was pretty rough. There's a little rough history in Tulsa for sure.
Yeah.
But we had no pivotal parts in any kind of wars or saving independence or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'd have another question. Are you really Alex Clark, son of Clark Kent, demi-alien superhero? That's why he's wearing glasses. That's why you wear glasses. You got to hide your
Some
identity.
comments about the glasses. I wasn't sure what that was about.
I think I kind of glazed over some of that too. Yeah, that's
I,
why.
I,
That's why you got to wear, because if you take them off, people know your identity.
I don't know if it's my place to dispel your fantasy, so I just decline to answer and let you go on believing whatever you want.
Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody else have any other questions before we? Who is Trent Reznor? Your dog. Jesus Christ. Sometimes I have.
Nin. He was in Nin.
Yeah, he's in the Nin. I did see it was earlier. Somebody said we need to get you a gaming PC. I don't know what kind of do you use, like a Mac? Are you a Mac user? What do you?
No, I have an HP Envy Phoenix that I've had. God, I don't remember when I bought it. Probably right around the same time I quit smoking.
Right. A lot of people use Mac. Like people. It's funny because like if you're not a gamer, it's a lot of times that they're using a Mac, and it just seems to be.
I've always been PC, and I know that like Macs last for like a decade. My PC is chugging right along. I'm not like heavy computing person. Spreadsheets and word processing and internet stuff, and now video conferencing.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I don't need to prove to the world that I have high style expectations. I get it. I have an iPhone.
Yeah.
But no, the thing that pisses me off about Mac is everybody says like, oh, it's so intuitive and it's so user friendly and all this stuff. And then like people who use Mac ask me questions about how to fix their computer. I'm like,
right.
I don't know, right click something, turn it off and on, like, the shit I have to do to my PC.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Use your one weird mouse button to do something and push your Apple buttons or whatever you have on there.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Mac at all. They're great for creativity, apparently, like for video making and stuff like that, I think. But
yeah. In terms of, I mean, my wife is a photographer, so or in generally visual arts, and so that I get that makes sense, But like spreadsheets and other stuff, just go to Google Drive.
Right.
It doesn't have to be an Apple product.
But
I have daydreamed about a gaming PC. I can't justify shelling out the money for it, but I when I was going to get back into gaming and decided to buy a console, it was I'm not. I play every night something.
Yeah.
It is how I unwind. I told you before, we got on here. No Man's Sky has been my jam for a little while.
Yeah.
Or 2 weeks. I found out the hard way that I get vertigo from VR. So
really,
that's unfortunate.
Did you get what VR headset did you get?
The PlayStation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's just I need to. They give you a warning, like don't spend too much time doing this. So, maybe I can call it quits at an hour. But I have just adapted. Playing No Man's Sky in VR, there are some things that are like easier to do. There's this little quality of life things that are better in VR. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's I tell my wife, when I'm coming up here to unwind for the night, I just tell her I'm going to space.
Right.
And that's, it's great to just be in that totally make-believe digital world, and, farming for minerals and building things that's where I want to be for a little bit.
Right. I recently picked up an Oculus Quest 2, and which most of it was like there's some VR games I want to play, and it's funny because I got it and I really haven't used it. Like I got it for very specific things that I want to do with it, and I've kind of put it off now. Like there's the Half-Life Alyx game that came out I want to play, and there's a Walking Dead VR game I want to play, and but I mostly got it because I was really interested in watching movies in VR. and which I'm assuming you could do that in the PSVR too. That like Netflix has an app for the Quest where you get a virtual movie theater because you're like this, and so instead, and it's funny because once I take it off, then it's like my shitty 50-inch TV. Like this is because you're looking at like a big 12-foot screen, and it feels like a 12-foot screen, and you're sitting in like a giant house, like some luxurious like theater room, and or you can sit in the empty space, just being pitch black and just have a big movie screen. And but I was an adopter of 3D TV, which died immediately after it came out. And so I have all these 3D movies, and I still have a 3D television, but I need to find a way to keep the longevity of it, and because they don't make TVs anymore. And I've found that I can rip them and re-encode them and watch them in VR and watch them in 3D, so I can watch 3D movies in a headset. But I'm kind of like you too, like not so much the vertigo, but it's very disorienting if you once you let go and kind of get into it, that because it's very, even like especially looking down, it's for me, it's always looking forward, you're fine, but once you start looking any other direction is when you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. But it's very interesting. I would love to see it take off, and it's one of those, like, it's kind of come and gone if you're ever kept up with all that. Like it touches every few years, and then it's like it's gone again.
I've only actually the word I was looking for was motion sickness. So it's VR motion sickness, and it's just I feel queasy and generally not that great. But they give some tips and tricks for handling that. But I only recently followed VR, wondering what was going to happen with the PS5. And of course, they're saying that they're not updating the headset or anything for PS5. Really?
Well, that's kind of shitty.
At least not at the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are going to be any PS5 exclusive VR games. It's all just kind of whatever you've got now. I don't know that that's necessarily signaling that there won't be new stuff for VR.
Yeah.
For PlayStation, but I'm still I got the I bought it because it was at Best Buy and I could go pick it up. But I got the Iron Man VR game, which I haven't played yet.
Right.
I mean, if I can't handle flying around in a spaceship, I don't know that
flying around as Iron Man.
Like Iron Man is going to be much better.
That should be cool though. And I don't want to keep you. Somebody did ask what your favorite video game would be.
Oh man. Well, like I said, I'm a sucker for city simulators. Yeah. So I will say that the game that I've played the most in the past year is City Skylines. But man, what brought me back into gaming was Star Wars Battlefront.
Okay. Like the new one, or the one, like the recent one from like 4 or 5 years ago, or the old one?
So it was the well, actually, I don't even know what the old one is. I had Battlefront on my PS2. That was a lot of fun. And then when the sort of refreshed version came out, what's EA's server or platform?
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it.
I forget too.
Yeah.
Apparently everybody hates EA.
Origin.
Origin, yeah. So I had the Origin thing for my PC, and I really wanted to play Battlefront. So I started playing not the new Battlefront.
Right. Because I think there was a Battlefront 2. I think there was the original Battlefront, then there was another, like the refresh Battlefront, and then I think there was a Battlefront 2. I think.
So Battlefront 2 is the totally big. That's much bigger. There's story missions and just a lot more environments and different game modes. But it was the one that was before that that got me into. I couldn't wait any longer. I wanted to play Battlefront on my PC, and so that was really my first PC gaming experience. And I suck at it, and it's not a gaming PC, so there's all kinds of lag. So it was Battlefront, and then Dragon Age, the Inquisitor.
I've never played
That's
that. I've had that on my wish list for years, and it goes on sale for like $5, and I've just never bought it.
get it. And I bought the Game of the Year edition on disc, which because I couldn't find, I can't, it's not available in the streaming for sale. The digital copy is not for sale.
Right.
I'm just suck at gaming. I can't even talk about it. But yeah, no, that was a good game. I played it on PC and then just got kind of sick of it on PC and wanted to play it on a console. So I've played that 2.5 times through.
Yeah.
So in terms of RPGs, I thought that was a really, really good game. I wish that there would be more sequels to that. Horizon Zero Dawn is excellent too. I don't know if you've played
I've heard
that.
of it. I haven't played it. I've heard of it.
It's fantastic. It just and apparently it's getting some more exclusive content on PS5, which is I'm a big fan of the game, so
Right.
that's one thing that would actually might bring me to shell out $400-$500 to get it whenever it becomes available.
See, I keep thinking of this in my head. I'm like, I could almost get you into a moderately decent gaming PC for closer to $600-$700.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, because I've got two, so like my actual gaming PC is very expensive, but I use a separate streaming PC, which is also more than capable of playing most games at a decent quality. Like my gaming rig will play anything in like 2K resolution in ultra fast setting, ultra high settings and everything. But just my other PC, it was closer to $600, and you could play games pretty well on it. It would make for a decent like mid-range gaming PC. If you decide to go that route, like we could probably get you into something for closer to $700 instead of spending that money on a PS5.
Well, when I get to that point,
Yeah.
I'll keep you in mind because it's just again, with the city simulators, like there's so much functionality I'm missing out on. Just all the mods and stuff that come with City Skylines. I mean, the idea that I can go through my town and like change the traffic signals. This is the shit I get excited about. Like, oh, I can change the lanes and make cars take an intersection a particular way. That's amazing. But I can't do that on the PS4. So
keep that in mind because we can definitely get you set up. But I think, does that anybody else have any other questions so we can let this man go play video games and go to bed?
Get back to the important work.
Get back to the important. Yeah, you have a very important job and you need to relax. That's what it boils down to. You need your downtime because you deal with very important things for a lot of us.
And some very difficult people.
Yeah, and it's mostly, I would say, a thankless job that I feel like I could say that for you, that it's probably a thankless job that you
not entirely true. I know the measurement, for like every bad comment, you need 10 good ones to kind of reverse, that's a kind of a thing on, product reviews that you see online, but it's true out in the wild in our brains. So I'm aware of that factor. So whenever I do and usually when people come up to us, one thing I do miss about, that we've missed out on this year is the actual, in-person gatherings at conferences or trade shows or whatever. When people come up to us at those events and say, thank you for your work, or, it's because of CASAA that I switched to vaping. I mean, that's huge. I had somebody come up to me at the rally and say, thank me personally because the work that we're doing with CASAA helped him switch to vaping. So that, I mean, just one comment like that melts away years of doubt and being put upon by the people that we're fighting against and all the drama in the community, all of it. Yeah. So we do get thank yous and they do mean a lot.
Yeah, that's good. As long as you get one, sometimes I feel like that's enough. When it's like one person thanks you, then it's like that. I did my part. If I helped one person, then that's all I can ever hope for. And then, it's all up from there, I feel like.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. And I, like I told you in private. Like I always hate getting people I know to come on and talk about things that they talk about all the time anyway. So I appreciate that you came on and and went through all that stuff, and I feel like we need this information out. I mean, I know it goes out in other places, and but it's one of those things. I kind of wanted to bring that to my small community, my little corner of the world, and kind of bring people in on some of the things that we face that we don't people don't know about, especially because there are a few vapors in here that I don't know for sure their level of knowledge about all the stuff that's going on, and so it's very cool to. It's one thing for me to say it, but it's like you're a certified expert. I mean, you know by job title alone, that's. But yeah, no, I definitely appreciate it. It's very awesome of you to come on. But yeah, we'll let you recap and learn some more game stuff, and then we'll have a part 2 for sure.
Yeah, it'll be good. We'll come back on. We'll do fun stuff.
Yeah, we got all the I was kind of looked at the time, and I'm like I just blew through all of it, and I apologize. That seems to happen.
I told you an hour and a half, and I knew I was going to be on here for longer. So yeah. An hour and a half is aspirational. People don't know that I am generally very quiet, but when you get me talking, I tend to have a hard time shutting up. So sorry about taking up all your show.
No, and that's why that's kind of why I try to ask open-ended stuff to kind of that way I don't want to answer for you, and that way whatever. This is we're breaking the fourth wall now on my interview style, but. But no, very cool. I appreciate it, man. But yeah, I'll let you get back to it. But we'll recap. We'll circle back in a few months, and we'll have a part 2. And hopefully nothing major happens in vaping, because we've talked about all the vaping stuff. So now hopefully nothing happens, so we don't have to talk about vaping again. We can just talk about everything else.
Yeah, so. If it would 5 minutes and then move on to something.
Yeah, it would be like everything still sucks. There's the recap. Yep. Cool. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. I'll let you get out of here. So thank you again for coming on. And I will, once I get this fixed up, I'll eventually get this onto YouTube as well, so we can.
Awesome.
Hopefully nothing. We didn't talk about anything divisive, so I try to think about that too. I'm like, did we talk about anything that would piss people off? Like I try to, I'm one of those, and I know from private conversations, I feel like we're both pretty non-censored, and like I don't like to limit conversations or censor things, or but it's like I'm at least mindful of like maybe this wouldn't be a good look, but I was like we didn't really cover anything that was too heated or too opinionated, so I tried to stick to facts.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for being on, and I will be spreading. Hopefully, you can get some new members. I'll continue to spread the links, and we'll send people your way. So, yeah, I'll talk to you soon, man. I hope you have a good night.
Yeah, thanks. I had a great time, and have a happy and safe holiday.
Yes,
and all
you
the best
too.
in the new year.
It's like a week. I keep forgetting that's a week away. Yeah, so
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, have a good one, man. Have a good holiday, and enjoy. Hopefully, you can get some time off. Play some games.
Yeah, I'm going to be asserting my mandatory vacation time. So
yeah, there you go. Cool. All right, man. Well, I will talk to you soon. So again, thank you so much, and have a good night. Have a great holiday, buddy.
All right, thanks.
And there he goes. There you go. Where's the Skype button? There we go. There we go. We did it. There's Alex. So yeah, if you guys